Hey guys, Joe Sidoti here. Thanks for stopping by for another video. This is part 2 in a multi-part video series on mixing an album. Now, if you haven't seen part 1, you really do need to go back and watch them in order. So make sure you start with part 1 and work your way through. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you get notified when the next video comes out. You got to click that bell. So I really appreciate you stopping by. Let's dive into part 2 of mixing an album. All right, so let's pick up right where we left off. What have we done so far? Well, we brought the drums together. We really worked on the overheads in the rooms and getting the snare to come out. We added a slam bus to the drums to give a little bit more energy and angst. We definitely did a little bit of saturation to the bass. We made a guitar group and we're doing a little bit of that. And of course, we added the console 1 to all of these tracks to get that SSL sound, or at least to try. So where we left it off on part 1 is I think we need to add a snare sample, and I think we need to duplicate the bass and do like a faux amp, use an amp simulator plugin or some form of distortion. We'll have to see which one we like. And then we'll probably mess with the guitars, and then we should be able to get this song right about where we want it, pre-mastering. This is not a mastering tutorial. I just want to get these mixes to where we're happy if we were going to be sending them to a mastering engineer. Or if you were going to master them yourself and you're putting that hat on, I do want that to be a separate process. So we're gonna treat it that way. All right, so just for a refresher, let's go ahead and just play the song to kind of remind ourselves of where we're at so far. All right, now that we are reminded, all right, let's duplicate the bass. I'm going to right click and duplicate. I'm going to uncheck the inserts. By default, it's set. We don't need those plugins. So now we've got ourselves an extra bass. Now it's going to already be louder. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be better or different. So this is the bass soloed again with nothing on it. Okay, nice and warm, great tone by Josh Hour, but I want to dirty this up quite a bit, and I want to blend it in with the other bass. Let's solo that. This is what we've done to the bass. We've added console 1, we've added the virtual mix rack, we've added chorus, and we've added the Sheps channel. So we've done basically all we can do to this thing without kind of going off the cliff, and that's what I want to do with this duplicated track. So let's hear what we've done so far to the bass soloed. So we definitely, I really like that chorus. We've definitely made it a little bit mid-rangey or a little bit brighter, but it's still fairly clean from like an overdrive, perspective. Okay, I chose Amplitude. I really like this. This is a really good amp simulator. I've been using it more than anything else when I need an amp simulator. And there's a lot of really good starting point presets. I'm going to recall they've got, I've got a Amplitude bundle, and the SVX, let's just start here. Yeah, basic SVX. Okay, let's just start with this and see what we got. Now, I do have a preset. I've gone through with my bass that's on the wall there. It's a jazz bass, and I've gone through and I've made some presets I like to always start with a preset. It just saves time. You know, it gets kind of the junk out of the way and gets you right to where you need to be able to just make some subtle changes to really make the difference that you're looking for. So this is a cab. Oh, we got to change out the cab. We got to go to an 810. Come on now. This ain't even right. 410, 15s. There we go. Let's see. 810E. Sure, we'll go with the 810E. And we've got an RE20 on it. That's fine. For something kind of gritty, I might go with a 441. Yeah, what the heck? Can always change it. And this is where I can blend the mic and the rooms. I probably won't use the room mic really on this. I just want the direct sound. But let's go back to the amp. And now I'm going to ultimately adjust this when it's in the mix, but I just want to kind of get an idea of how much distortion I have. So I'm going to solo it. At this point, when I'm in the mix, you know, part one, we did a lot of soloing. We did a lot of how does this sound by itself, but ultimately that doesn't matter. What matters is how it sounds together. So we're going to do a lot less soloing in part two here because I really want it to come together, and I don't really care what it sounds like soloed anymore at this point. But for sake of finding a decent little bass tone, let's solo it and let's see what we can do here. Okay, and I'm going to hear that bypassed. So you may be looking at this and going, why are you taking out so much bass out of the bass? Well, remember, we've got a pretty solid bass tone. I'm wanting to add something dirty and gritty, and I don't need necessarily more bottom end. I need more of the mid-range and the distortion. This is okay. Let's try a different microphone. Let's go back to what they recommend, and I'm gonna keep it pretty much on the cone, move it a little bit. Let's see what that sounds like. I'm not really digging this just yet, but we'll see. It sounds good. It's just not what I hear in my head. That's a big challenge. Sometimes you really definitely need to know what you're trying to go for. Sometimes if you just bring up a track and you try to make it sound as good as it can, but good compared to what? I say good compared to what I hear in my mind. What I'm hearing is a completely different tone than the original. I want to completely simulate something totally not this. Because I've done this before, right? This isn't my first rodeo. I know that what happens when I have a nice solid bass and then I bring in something that's pretty distorted. I know what kind of energy I can get. And so, been there, done that kind of a thing. And so that's why I know what I'm going for in my head. And this isn't really doing it. And that's okay. Sometimes you gotta just move on, try something different. Instead, I'm going to go with something that I use all the time and I know that it works, and that is the CLA Signature Series bass plugin. All right, here it is. Now look, here's why I like this plugin. See how on the first track we added some distortion and we added some chorus and then we added some EQ and some other stuff. I mean, this plugin, it's got bottom end EQ, it's got mid-range, it's got compression, it turns on or off like a high pass filter if you really want to get some extra sub, or if you want to cut this sub, distortion and chorus. I mean, it's everything that you need. Now, I'm not going to add the chorus probably because we already have that, but I am definitely going to keep it on the growl. So literally stock as is, but without the chorus. Let's see what that sounds like. Pretty good. Let's go for roar. So that added a lot of volume. At this point in our mix, we can't afford a bunch more volume because remember, we're mixing into that stereo bus compressor. And we start getting more than -3 gain reduction, then we're really going to be pushing and squashing the whole mix. So it's very important at this point that we level match what's going into a plugin and what's coming out of the plugin. We're just affecting the sound, not the volume. And that's what this VU meter is for, by the way. This VU meter is showing me where I'm at before I hit the bus compressor. So this is just me assuming, like I'm pretending like if this was a hybrid setup, the bus compressor is analog. It is outside of the digital domain. So that's how I treat this process. And so that VU meter is letting me know where my digital console is hitting before I get to my outboard gear. I wish that was a rack of gear right now. It's not. Anyways, so by hitting the master mix or my VU meter at 0, I know that it's going to hit my outboard compressor where I've got the knob set. Does that make sense? Okay, let's match the volume. Okay, that's a pretty good matched volume. Had to turn it way down because of this roar. I'm gonna mess with the EQ just a little bit and see if we can't make it a little more angry. Okay, now I'm going to unsolo that, I'm going to turn it down, we're going to play the song, and we're going to start to bring up this new distorted bass, and we'll see what happens. Maybe something magical will happen. It did exactly what I thought it would do. It made it thicker, it made the bass take up a little bit more space, it added a little bit more body, so I didn't have to add that with EQ per se. But another thing that it has done, if you were paying attention, is we have pegged our VU meter. Okay, we don't want that because of things that are going on down the line. Always being mindful of our signal flow and our gain structure. That when you hear that, that's what that means. You got all these different components all within the flow of the signal, and everything's got to match. It's got to be, you know, a plan. You've got to have a plan in mind of how it needs to be at the end. So I'm simply, at this point, going to make some VCAs. Now, in Pro Tools, you can make VCAs. I don't know, you know, it could be groups in Logic or Studio One, I'm not sure exactly what the nomenclature is, but in Pro Tools, I'm going to make a VCA. And what that'll allow me to do is group like instruments, drums, bass, guitars in this case, and I can lower the volume of those, but it's independent of the actual faders. So later on down the road, if I want to automate the volume of the bass, if I automate my VCA up or down, but later on I decide I wish I could change the balance from clean bass to dirty bass, if I wrote the automation on the individual tracks, I'd have to go in and fix it, but I can always change the balance of that group later, but yet my automation of volume still goes up and down, or muting and unmuting. So it's a really great way to work with groups in Pro Tools. So let's make some new VCAs. Don't matter here, we're gonna come down to VCA Master. And I'm going to make drums, bass, guitar. Let's just make 3. Create. Let's flip over to here. Let's move these to the end before my master. And this one here is going to be drums, exclamation. I always do all caps when it's a group and an exclamation. Or sometimes I'll do a lowercase g if it's a group, a lowercase s if it's a subgroup or a submix. Sometimes I'll use a lowercase v so that I know when I'm looking through a sea of things that that's a VCA. Let's do that in this case. Drums, lowercase v. I held command and right arrow to get to the next one. Now, these aren't associated with a group yet, so these aren't doing anything. They have no control at this point. So we need to make some groups, and then we can control the group with these VCAs. So even though I do have the guitar bus, I'm gonna leave that. I don't wanna put the bus in this VCA. It just gives me a level of adjustability later. I could do all sorts of things and have all sorts of options level-wise, plugin-wise. So I'm not gonna include the guitar bus, even though all these guitars are feeding into that bus. I'm going to just include the individual tracks. So select those, all 8, Command G, and I'm going to call this guitars. It's all caps, and see here where it says VCA none, I'm going to put it in VCA, boom, guitar V. Okay, now, when I lower the guitar, watch, they all go down. And so let me show you what I was talking about. So let's just say I wanted to bring it all down, 3 dB, and I automated that. But then later on, I wish that guitar 3 was louder. Well, if I try to change if I've automated the individual track and I try and turn up, guitar 3, it's just gonna go right back to wherever the automation is written. So instead, I can move them all together in a group like this, but I can also come over and take that guitar 3 and just turn it up by itself. And so I don't have to hold control or option or whatever. You don't have to hold any key modifiers to be able to make a tweak to that group, and then simply go back to your group and adjust the overall volume. So let's undo what I just did. Boom, 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 boom. So that's what a VCA does. So let me set up the other VCAs for the drums and the bass. Okay. Now let's work on getting our master mix a little less hot, so we've got more headroom still to work with as we keep adding and tweaking and doing. Okay, let's now press play, and I'm gonna bring the level down. I'm gonna be looking at the VU meters and bringing it closer to 0 with the whole mix. And this is also another great way to quickly say, do I have too much guitars, not enough guitars, too much drums? 3 faders control this whole mix at this point. I know there's no vocals. Side note, you don't want to hear me sing. And if you do, leave a comment. Say, yeah, dude, add vocals. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of important to have vocals, so leave a comment. You want me to add vocals to this? I can do it. All right, here we go. way. I lowered each one exactly 3 dB. So I essentially just brought the entire mix down 3 dB. Let me show you another way we could have done this, just so you're aware of the options. I chose the VCA route because later on when we start bringing in other songs, this is going to help us get our mixes together quickly. And that's, you know, one of the main points of this whole series. Since everything ultimately goes to a mix bus in this session, the mix bus has nothing on it, just a VU meter, and then that mix bus goes to the master output, which has another VU meter, which is what we're looking at now, and it has the CLA mix down. All I had to do was lower the mix bus 3 dB. And that would have been fine considering digital floating point 32-bit stuff. I mean, you can turn, it could be, every track could be clipping on the input, but if you turn down the bus before it gets to the output, then guess what? Your output won't be clipping. But I don't think that's the best practice, because I do think that you need to be thinking about signal like it works in analog. I think it's going to make you a better engineer if you know how it works. I got started with analog, so everything that I do in digital is all about how I'm supposed to do it in analog. So I just don't want to slam my mix bus before it hits the converters. So I treat the mix bus as such. I don't just turn down the mix bus, because all I'm doing is turning down distorted signal at that point. Now I know with digital it's different, but I don't treat it like it's digital, I treat it like it's analog. So that being said, I lowered the VCA's 3 dB instead of the mix bus. Another cool thing, side note, about using VCA's in a mix is you can solo things really easily. So that's helpful, just, and this sets us up down the line for bouncing out stems if someone's going to be using some of these tracks for live performance, for backing tracks, or if you need to do a radio edit, vocals up, vocals down, no vocals, just background vocals. Using VCAs is going to be a really quick way to do that. It's not the only way, it's just what makes sense to me, so that's what I'm doing. Okay, we've got the level down. We're getting close. Now let's work on, I think the overall thing is a little dark. The guitars are a little, they're okay. I mean, it's not the greatest guitar tones to begin with, but they're not bad either. But let's just put a little bit more sauce on some stuff and see if we can't get it jiving. But for this next step, I'm finally now going to get rid of this VU meter, and I'm going to bring up this window so that we can start to really make sure that we're paying attention to our master now. Let's work on the guitars. Oh man, so I used the compressor and then I got it, whatever. I didn't really notice it doing anything, and then I turned it off and I realized, oh, it was doing a lot. Man, it really pushed the guitars forward. It really made all the inconsistencies a little bit, you know, less. Yeah, they're not very dynamic to begin with, so it's not about fixing ups and downs. It's about using it as a forward moving pusher. All right, I'm gonna keep going. I'm going to work on getting the drums a little bit brighter now. It's really starting to come together. So let's work on the drum bus. So that helped. I had a little more compression, a little more top end on the drum bus. I think it's time to add a snare sample. I think what's making the drum sound dark to me is the fact that the snare's not that crispy, or I don't have a lot of snap to it. I want to blend some of that in. So here we go. Let's start adding a snare sample. First thing I'm going to do is duplicate my snare, except for the insert, just so I've always got my original, right? I don't replace, you augment. So I'm going to put trigger. Okay, this is Steven Slate's trigger, and we are going to browse for a sample. Now, I know I want something crispy. I know I've got plenty of room, so it doesn't have to be super roomy. I just want a little bit of smack and sizzle I want to add in. I'm just going to go through some of these Platinum Kit presets and I'm going to see if I find a snare. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to solo it so I can just hear the snare, and then I'm going to come over to the triggering setup and I'm going to make sure that we're hitting the input properly and we've got the sensitivity set right. This is not a trigger tutorial. If you want to dive deeper into that, let me know. But for now, just watch as I do it. Okay, now I'm just going to go through and find some different samples till something, jumps out and grabs me. I like that. Let's see if we can adjust the blend a little bit, maybe mess with the pitch. Okay, Notice it's triggering all sorts of different samples. I don't know if you can tell, but it's, you know, based off of the velocity of my hit, it's following. And if you look on the actual waveform, I mean, that consistency that you're seeing there, that's just because this was going through an analog mic pre and it was probably turned up, so it had some gentle compression that way. It might have been tracked with a compressor, I don't remember. And I'm not the worst drummer in the world, so I hit fairly consistent, but you know, I'm not perfect, and so they're kind of all over the place. So I'm going to adjust that in trigger so that it replaces. I don't want to completely just go to one sample, but I do want to not have it trigger some of the little softer hits, just so that it's a little more powerful. I do that under curves. So let's listen to them together and see what it sounds like. Okay, it definitely had some room to it though, but you know, we need to see what this sounds like in the mix. So let's do that. I like it. I'm just going to go with it. So I'm going to listen to a couple different spots, a couple different fills, make sure that the trigger settings are good, and then I'm going to commit it and I'm going to have a sample snare. So let's do that. Let's listen, make sure that we're good, make sure we're happy with our settings. We don't miss any hits or have any missed triggers or re-triggers. Let's see what we can do. I want to hear that fill. Look at, I mean, I love trigger. That's all I'm gonna say. Here's a question. Well, Joe, if you wanted crispier, why don't you just add more bottom snare? I could. It just so happens that this bottom snare on this track, it sounds too floppy to me. And if I try to, you know, accentuate it, it almost sounds, it just sounds messy. So it's not giving me what I'm hearing in my head. I want something more similar to the snare top, but I want it to be brighter, more crisp. And why not take advantage of a snare that was recorded at NRG? I mean, let's just be honest. Okay, that's why I'm not trying to bring this out of the bottom snare mic. So I like that. Sounds like the drum fills are doing just fine. Let me hear one more time and then we'll commit. Love it. So I'm gonna name this before I commit it. Snare sample. I'm gonna put a comment on here. It was trigger 2, snare 12A. Close enough. Okay, I probably won't ever come back to it. And if I do, I can later, because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna commit it and then I'm gonna hide and make it inactive. So I can always come back. So no big deal. So I'm gonna right click this and let's commit. I don't need this though before I do. Okay, select a track. Yep. And sends groups assignments. Yeah. So now it'll be my drum group. It'll go to the drum bus and all that. So hit OK. By the way, this Mac Mini so far has been pretty great. If you haven't seen that video, I'm using a Mac Mini, the newer one, the 6 core, which gives me 12 threads of processing here in Pro Tools. I've got 32 gigs of RAM. I'm using external Thunderbolt 3 hard drive bays with SSD drive. So I'm doing everything I can, you know, and I have an external graphics card as well. All right, let's see what that sounds like. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's bring back up our CLA mix down, make sure that we're not doing anything that we're unhappy with there. And I'm going to go to a new part. Let's go to the bridge. We haven't heard that in a while. You know what? I did some cool stuff on the hat. I'm going to bring the hat up a little bit. Again, another reason why the VCA. Just because they're grouped doesn't mean that they're grouped. Now that they're assigned to a VCA, you know, I don't have to move one fader and they all move. Now, you may want that, and you just need to know the difference. You know, like we grouped the 3 bridge guitars, so they should, if I'm not incorrect, they should still be grouped, and they are. But they're also in the VCA. So when I raise or lower all of the guitars, they'll still go up. So that's the difference. But you know, it's helpful. I'm just gonna crisp up that hi-hat ever so slightly. There we go. Let's just do that part again. Cool, man. We are close. So we've duplicated the bass, and we have gridded that out. We worked on the guitars, made them a little bit brighter. We compressed them. We worked on the drum bus and got it a little brighter, just a little bit more compression. We've readjusted our gain structure. So we're at a point right now where I wouldn't necessarily send this to a client, but I would save it, Command S. And at this point, I'm about ready to want to open up the next song start importing these settings, and then have something to compare it to. So now song number 2, if I bring in these drum settings and these bass settings and guitar settings as they're applicable, I'll know whether they're working universally, or if I find that I discover something even better on song number 2, then I'll come back to song number 1 and say, well, I really like something that happened over here. I'm gonna go back to song number 1 and do it. So that's kind of where I'm at in my head. See, that's the cool thing about sending things to a bus. Someone once commented on a video and they said, oh, well, you're just cheating. You're just putting it all in buses. And it's like, well, is that cheating? Or is that knowing how to take advantage of routing? Here's why it's gonna be so helpful in this process. Okay, song number 1 has guitar 1 through 8. Well, what if song number 2 is completely different? What if it has only 3 guitars? What if it has 16 guitars? But you want to do the same type of thing to your guitars on all your songs for your record. So it stands to reason that if you are consistent with your guitar bus and you drive the different guitars into it, then you're going to get similar results quicker. That doesn't mean you don't have to go into each individual channel. If you got all your guitars sound completely different, well then yeah, you're gonna need to do some things, high pass it, add some EQ, but the consistency, the common denominator at this point is your guitar bus, your drum bus, things like that. So that's just another reason why that's important. Before we wrap this up, I wanna show you what this CLA, what the mixdown is doing. If you're not sure what it's doing, it's definitely not snake oil, but I mean, who knows if it's really truly emulating what he does, but who cares? I just like what it does. It's easy to use and it gets things to a point that I like almost instantaneously. So I don't care if it's what he does. I don't use it because it has his name attached to it. I use it because it freaking works. And so, yeah, that's the beauty of like demoing a plugin or something. Just try it. If it's crap, then don't buy it. But that's where I'm at. So I'm gonna bypass and let you hear the difference between before and after. What a difference. It's thicker, it's got more energy, it definitely has the glue, it definitely has the drive. I'll mess with these real quick just so you can kind of hear what they're doing, but like I said, there's no joke. This is factory default. I just leave it and it makes things better, providing that you're hitting it with the right level. Okay, that is huge with a plugin on your master bus. It's everything, your gain structure. So I'm just gonna mess with some of these faders so you can kind of see what it's doing. I'm gonna turn them on, turn them off. Notice when I did the drive just then, it didn't get louder, but the output LED meters were just slammed because it's hitting so much into compression via the distortion. Watch one more time. Watch these meters right here. Here's default. Just completely slammed. You talk about not needing a limiter. I wouldn't do that on my master bus, but that's how good this plugin is you can do that and your volume doesn't change. They did a great job with this plugin. Gosh, I think we're pretty much good to go. I really like where we're at. Yeah, I think that's it for this song right now, because we are going to move on to a second song on the next video. And then what I would probably do if this was the only song I was mixing, I would definitely do a little bit more probably EQ on the master mix. See if I can finagle, see if there's something that I'm not liking, make sure it's just maximized the best that it can. I really want to see how things are coming together before we decide that we need to EQ some things. This one may end up sounding the best out of all of them. This one may end up sounding the worst out of all of them. And that's gonna give us the information we need to be able to go back and reopen these sessions and tweak things to get that cohesive sound that we're going for. So I think we're done with this portion of the process. Things were a lot simpler and a lot easier at this point because we took the time that we did on part one, you know, to get things to a good foundation. So now we're starting to put walls up and we're starting to put cabinets in, and now we're into we're in the countertops and tile. We're really making this, you know, house come together, and it's starting to look like a house, and pretty soon we're gonna make it a home. Let me know in the comments if this is helping you. Please share it and like it to all your friends. I really hope that people are able to find this information helpful. I hope it turns on some light bulbs for you. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel, do all the stuff, because it really helps. It gets these videos in front of more people, which then allows me to justify spending time on them, and I really want to spend as much time as I can making content like this for you guys. So again, thank you so much for your time. We'll see you on the next video.